Hello and welcome. This is a video about the Catholic Church's teaching on purgatory. The common objection that Catholics will receive from anti-Catholics and Protestants in general would go something like this. Purgatory is an unbiblical invention of the Catholic Church. The Bible teaches that Jesus' sacrifice is sufficient for our salvation, and there is no need for a place like purgatory. Well, in response, the Catholic Church would say that it teaches purgatory is not a second chance for salvation or a denial of Christ's sufficiency. Rather, it is a merciful expression of God's love, rooted in Scripture and sacred tradition, as clarified by the Council of Trent and the Catechism of the Catholic Church. The scriptural basis for purgatory. Temporal consequences of sin. While Jesus' sacrifice on the cross is sufficient for the forgiveness of sins, the Bible acknowledges that even forgiven sin can have consequences. For example, after David's sin with Bathsheba, God forgave him, but David still faced temporal punishment, as can be seen in 2 Samuel chapter 12, verses 13 to 14. This illustrates the need for purification even after forgiveness. In the Gospel of Matthew chapter 12, verse 32, Jesus mentions that certain sins will not be forgiven in this age or the age to come, implying the possibility of purification after death. In 1 Corinthians chapter 3, verses 13 to 15, St. Paul describes how each person's works will be tested by fire. Some will suffer loss, but they will still be saved, as through fire. This imagery aligns with the Church's understanding of purgatory as a process of purification. The Council of Trent, Session 25, affirmed, "There is a purgatory, and the souls detained there are helped by the suffrages of the faithful, but especially by the acceptable sacrifice of the altar, which we know as the Mass." This teaching emphasizes that purgatory is not a separate path to salvation, but a process for those already saved to be purified of remaining imperfections before entering heaven. Trent also upheld the long-standing practice of praying for the dead, which is rooted in 2 Maccabees chapter 12, verses 45 and 46, where prayers are offered for those who have died so that they may be freed from sin. The Catechism of the Catholic Church explains, "All who die in God's grace and friendship, but still imperfectly purified, are indeed assured of their eternal salvation, but after death they undergo purification, so as to achieve the holiness necessary to enter the joy of heaven." Far from denying the sufficiency of Christ's sacrifice, this teaching shows how God's grace continues to work in souls, perfecting them so they may fully share in His holiness. And this is a reference, of course, to Hebrews chapter 12, verse 14. Christ's sacrifice and purgatory. The Church teaches that purgatory is entirely dependent on Christ's saving work. The purification in purgatory is made possible only because of His death and resurrection. As Pope Benedict XVI explained in Spe Salvi, purgatory is not some kind of supra-worldly concentration camp where souls are forced to undergo punishment in a purely external way. Rather, it is the inwardly necessary process of transformation by which a person becomes capable of Christ, capable of God. A loving and hopeful doctrine. Purgatory is not about fear or punishment, but hope and love. It reflects God's mercy, ensuring that nothing unclean enters heaven, while giving those who die in friendship with him the means to be perfected. In summary, purgatory does not contradict the sufficiency of Christ's sacrifice, but rather shows how this sacrifice continues to sanctify and transform souls. It is deeply rooted in Scripture, affirmed by church councils, and practiced by Christians from the earliest centuries. Instead of rejecting purgatory, we should embrace it as a gift of God's mercy that leads us to the fullness of His love.